So if you look at the last 5-year past papers, you will come across that you always find a question on what? On reproduction. It can either be an essay question, or it can either be a diagram which can come on section A, which I can tell you to label the female reproductive system or the male reproductive system. So in this video, we are going to simplify the topic of menstrual cycle. This is just a subtopic on reproduction. So here you can see the diagram of how menstruation occurs. So most students, they try to memorize the names of the hormones without understanding the process behind it. So in today's video, I'll help you to understand the process behind it, not just memorizing the words and the hormones like the follicle stimulating hormones and the other hormones. And we are going to also, at the end of the video, we are going to solve these two questions which came in 2020 for how you can describe the menstrual cycle and how you can explain the possible risk associated with using contraceptive. So we know there are a lot of methods of contraceptive. All of them have advantages and disadvantages. So without wasting much of your time, let's begin. So what is the menstrual cycle? So first you need to understand what the menstrual cycle is. So whenever we are talking about the menstrual cycle, we are saying that this is a cycle. So whenever we are talking about the menstruation cycle, we are saying that this is a cycle. So this is a cycle of about 28 days, and it occurs in women. So which occurs in women, and it has 2 stages. So it has 2 stages which occurs. Each stage has 14 days. So it occurs in women and it has 2 stages, and it has 2 phases. We say phases, which are ovulation and menstruation. We are saying that this menstrual cycle, it is a cycle which occurs in women's. So it occurs in women approximately 28 days, and it has 2 phases. So we have the first phase, which is ovulation, and the second stage, which is menstruation. So what is ovulation and what is menstruation? Because we are just naming them. So whenever we are talking about ovulation, so ovulation in simple terms, we are saying that this is the release. So this is the release of the we are saying that this is the release of the ovule from the ovary. So whenever we are saying ovulation, this is the release of the ovum from the ovary. The egg is now released into the uterus, or into the fallopian tube, so that it can travel to the uterus. Then when you're talking about menstruation, so what is menstruation? So menstruation, this is the menstruation, this is the shedding of the uterus lining together with blood. Blood. So menstruation, this is the shedding of the uterus lining together with some blood. So this is what girls call period. So this occurs normally or approximately 3 to 5 days. Yeah, there is bleeding, which is the shedding of the uterus together with some blood. So now, why does menstruation occur? So menstruation occurs as a result of the egg not being fertilized. So if the egg is not fertilized, the uterus lining starts to shed off, because the main reason for the forming of the egg is so that it can be fertilized. So if the egg is not fertilized, meaning the uterus should shed, because we said the uterus is where the baby is supposed to stay. So these are the two stages which we are going to look at in form of a diagram, so you're able to understand the menstrual cycle if you look at the diagram. So I will encourage you to pay particular attention as we start looking at the diagram. So now we are saying that menstruation has two stages: the ovulation phase and the menstruation phase. So now we say that these occur approximately 14 days apart from each other. So we are saying that ovulation is 14 days, and also menstruation is 14 days, which gives us 28 days together. So now let's talk about how the entire process occurs. So now, how does the entire process occur? So we're going to look at the diagram now. So pay particular attention. So remember, in the previous video for endocrine, I said that we have two hormones which are released from the pituitary gland. We say the pituitary gland. So we say that the pituitary gland is the master gland, meaning it activates other gland to start producing other hormones. So you are going to see the function of the pituitary gland in stimulating the process of menstruation, how it starts the process of menstruation. So whenever we are talking about hormones, what you need to remember is that hormones are just messengers. So hormones are what? Chemical messengers. We said that if the brain doesn't use electrical signals, it can also use what? Chemical messengers to communicate with other parts of the body. So in our case, we are talking about the pituitary gland in the process of what? Menstrual cycle. So the pituitary gland starts the process by what? By stimulating the what? The ovaries. So now, how does the pituitary gland stimulate the ovary? So the pituitary gland produces two hormones, which are the follicle stimulating hormone, also known as FSH, and luteinizing hormone. So the pituitary gland, it produces these two hormones which acts on the what? Ovaries. So these two hormones stimulate the ovaries now to produce two other hormones again, which are oestrogen and what? Progesterone. So this is how the process starts. So the brain tells the ovaries, oh, starts producing what? Progesterone and progesterone. Oestrogen. Yeah, sorry. Oestrogen and progesterone. So we are going to see what makes the brain to tell the ovaries to start producing those hormones. What is the signal? Yeah. So now let's go through the what? The process. So the process begins when the follicle stimulating hormones are secreted by the what? By the pituitary gland. So the process starts by what? When the pituitary gland stimulates the what? When the pituitary gland produces the follicle stimulating hormones to stimulate what? The ovaries. So now you're asking, why does the pituitary gland does what? Produces the follicle stimulating hormone. What makes the pituitary gland to do that? So remember, we have what is known as corpus luteum. So corpus luteum is this structure which you are seeing here. So this structure is responsible for producing what? Progesterone. And we said that progesterone is responsible for maintaining the what? The lining of the uterus. So once the egg is not fertilized, we say the uterus starts shedding off. So once the uterus starts to shed off, also the what? The corpus luteum starts to shed. So once this is completely gone, it will stimulate the what? The pituitary gland to start producing the what? The follicle stimulating hormone, so that the process can start again. So that's the first thing. The pituitary gland does what? Produces what? Follicle stimulating hormone, which causes now what? The ripening of the egg in the ovaries by stimulating the development of the Graafian follicles. So we say that the pituitary gland, it will produce what? Follicle stimulating hormone. Then this hormone will act on the what? On the ovary, so that the ovaries will cause the ovum to ripen and causes the development of this. You have seen that there is a developing of this structure which is known as the Graafian follicle. So this is known as the Graafian follicle. Yeah. So this Graafian follicle will develop allowing the what? The ovum. So now what is the importance of the Graafian follicle? So this Graafian follicle, if you can see, there is an R. So this Graafian follicle now, it is the structure which will produce what is known as oestrogen. So oestrogen will now be produced by the what? By the Graafian follicle. So now what does this oestrogen, once it is produced by the Graafian follicle, it does? So this now starts to do what? It starts to build the what? The uterus. Oh, as you can see, the halo is starting from here. So now oestrogen starts the process of building the what? The uterus. Whoa. Yeah. So this is the first process of the menstrual cycle. So once the uterus is destroyed, once the shedding is done, your brain will send the signal to the what? To the ovary via the what? The follicle stimulating hormone, which will stimulate the what? The ovaries. The ovaries will develop a structure known as Graafian follicle, which will now produce what? Oestrogen. Then oestrogen begins to build the uterus again. So now once the building up of the uterus starts, it now, so once the building starts, This also oestrogen does what? It inhibits now, it stops the what? The production of what? The follicle stimulating hormone. So this is how the process occurs. The brain works hand in hand, so it is coordinated. So once the follicle stimulating hormone produces the Gavian follicle, once it reaches here, oestrogen now will tell the what? The pituitary gland stop producing this. They have already produced me, which is the oestrogen. So if oestrogen is produced, no need of producing it over and over again. So that's why. Then once this stops, it also stimulates something. So once it stops what? This, it now stimulates what? The production of this other hormone from the pituitary, which is what? The luteinizing hormone. So oestrogen also has two functions. So once it is produced, it does what? It begins the rebuilding of the uterus. Two, it also inhibits the production, it stops the production of this hormone. And it also stimulates the production of what? Luteinizing hormone. Yeah, so this is how the process is coordinated. So now what does this luteinizing hormone does? So the luteinizing hormone now, it is what now does what? It what now stimulates the ovulation and the development of corpus luteum. So we are saying that once oestrogen does what? Is released. So it will take 5 to 14 days for the entire uterus to be built. So once the uterus is built, oestrogen will tell the follicle stimulating hormone to stop producing it and start producing the other hormone. Now this other hormone, once it comes, it will cause what? Ovulation. So it will cause now the release of the egg on day 14. So on day 14 now, the egg will be released. Why? Because the luteinizing hormone is released. So this is how the what comes. So let's summarize before moving on to the next point, before you get lost. So now we say that the first thing which starts is, so the first step is follicle stimulating hormone is produced. By the pituitary gland. And then the follicle stimulating hormone, it does what? It stimulates the formation of the Graafian follicle, which produces what? Or which secretes oestrogen. Yeah, so that is how the brain communicates with the ovaries to start the process of menstruation. So remember, we are in the second stage, which is menstruation. This is how menstruation occurs. So now, menstruation consists of the building of the shading of the uterus and also the building of the uterus. That is menstruation. Remember that. Yeah. Then we are saying that after it stimulates the formation of the Graafian follicle, which secretes oestrogen, oestrogen starts now the building of the uterus. So oestrogen begins the building of the uterus, of the lining of the uterus. Yeah. So that is how your brain coordinates with your body. So we are in what? We are in. So this everything occurs between day 5 and day 14. Yeah. So you need to remember that. So after estrogen is produced, we said it stops the production now of follicle stimulating and also stimulates. So it also, so you can say that it also stimulates the production of luteinizing hormone, which does what? Which does what? Which begins or which stimulates ovulation. So that's why the question was 8 marks to describe the menstrual cycle. So it is a long process which you need to explain in steps by step. So you say follicle stimulating hormone is produced by the pituitary gland. Then after that, it stimulates the formation of the Graafian follicle, which secretes oestrogen. Then once oestrogen begins, so once oestrogen is produced, it begins the building of the lining of the uterus. This will also stops now what? The production of the follicle stimulating hormone, because oestrogen is produced. No need of producing it again. And it also stimulates the process, the secretion of luteinizing hormone, which begins ovulation. So now once ovulation starts, and once the development of this other structure, which is the corpus luteum, is formed. So this corpus luteum is just the remains of the Graafian follicle once the ovary is released. So now once the ovary is released, the remaining is what is known as the corpus luteum. So this structure also is important. Why is this structure important? Because this structure also secretes the other hormone which we talked about, which is secreted from the ovary. We said the ovary secretes two hormones, oestrogen and also progesterone. So now progesterone is secreted from what? Corpus luteum. So this now is what secretes what? Progesterone. Yeah. So this is how the two hormones are secreted, and this is how the brain coordinates with the ovaries so that it can produces these two hormones. So now we are at the production of progesterone. So now what is the function of progesterone? So now once progesterone is secreted, it is the one now which does what? Maintains the growth of the uterus lining and increases the blood supply to the uterus. So this now is what maintains the what? The lining. So progesterone maintains the lining. So now we are asking, how does the shedding occurs now? So I talked about this structure, the corpus luteum. So the corpus luteum, as days are passing and as the egg is not fertilized, it keeps on doing what? It keeps on reducing. It keeps on shrinking. So when it's shrinking until it reaches where it disappears. So once the corpus luteum disappears, meaning progesterone will stop, or the corpus luteum will stop producing progesterone, meaning the maintaining of the lining of the uterus will stop, which causes the uterus to start shedding, which starts again the entire process of the follicles being stimulated, they stimulate the ovaries. So this is how the menstrual cycle occurs. So now let's summarize it. So we said step 1, the pituitary gland will produce the follicle stimulating hormone, which will stimulate the formation of the Graafian follicle, which now the Graafian follicle will release oestrogen. Oestrogen begins the building of the lining of the uterus. So once it reaches the 14, oestrogen will stimulate the luteinizing hormone to produce what? Or to cause ovulation, which is the release of the egg. Once the egg is released, the remaining of the Graafian follicle, which is the corpus luteum, will start producing progesterone, which maintains the growth of the uterus. Once corpus luteum degenerates and disappears, progesterone will stop being produced and it will cause the shedding of the uterus. Why? Because the egg is not fertilized. So now how can you write this in form of an essay? Okay, so now that we have understood the meaning of the diagram, we are going to see how you can write an 8 marks essay. So I've already started. We said that the first stage is the follicle stimulating hormone is produced by the pituitary gland. Why? Because the egg is not fertilized and the corpus luteum is destroyed. 2. Once it is produced, it does what? Stimulates the formation of the Graafian follicle. So the Graafian follicle, it is what now does what? Secretes oestrogen. And when we say that oestrogen begins the rebuilding of the lining of the uterus. So once the lining of the uterus begins, oestrogen does what? Stimulates the I'm saying that once oestrogen is produced, it begins the building of the uterus. Then once that starts, it also stops the production of the follicle stimulating hormone. It tells the pituitary stop producing this hormone and start producing what? Luteinizing hormone, so that you can start ovulation. So once ovulation starts, also the what? The corpus luteum that's what produces or secretes secretes progesterone. So once progesterone is produced, it maintains the growth of the lining of the uterus. And it also increases the blood supply to the uterus. So that is the fourth point. So now once the progesterone is produced, we say that it maintains what? The readiness. So once it does that, we say that this is also in just the readiness of what? Of fertilization. So it also inhibits the secretion of FSH and LSH. What are we saying? So now, once progesterone is produced, this will now inhibit both this and this. It will tell them stop producing. Let's wait for what? For fertilization to occur. So if fertilization does not occur, we say that this part starts to get smaller and smaller and smaller until it disappears. So once it disappears, the lining of the uterus breaks down and the pituitary gland starts secreting what? The follicle stimulating hormone to begin the cycle all over and over again. But if the egg is fertilized, the corpus luteum takes longer time to be destroyed until the placenta is formed. So that's what you need to remember. So the corpus luteum secreted, it maintains the growth of the lining of the uterus. It also increases the blood supply. Yeah. Then it also inhibits the production of the follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone from the pituitary gland. Yeah. Then we are saying that however the corpus luteum gets progressively smaller until it completely degenerates. Then once that happens, progesterone is not produced, which causes the pituitary gland to start secreting the what? The pituitary gland. So now you are wondering, so to sum up the video or to conclude, we are saying that what are those days which are considered to be what? The fertile days. Those days which are considered to fertile days are days 11 to 16. So between here, so these are the days which are known as the fertile days. Why? Because we know that the sperm can survive 3 to 5 days. So sperm survive 3 to 5 days, while the egg only survives for 12 to 24 hours. So now why are we saying that this period from 11 to 16 is the fertile period? So this period is fertile because if you have sexual intercourse from 11, 12 or 13, the sperm can survive 3 to 5 days until reaching what? Day 14, where the egg is released, causing what? Fertilization. Yeah. Then we are also saying that due to some stress, illness, or hormonal balance, ovulation can occur again before what? Day 14. It can occur previous. It can occur on day 13 or 12, depending on the type of a girl. Then the periods which are known as infertile, or those that they call safe periods, are from day 17 to 28 and also day 1 to 10. So these days are what are known as safe days. Why? So 17 to 28, the reason is that this phase is because ovulation has already ended on day 14. And before the next cycle begins, the next cycle begins after 28. So once ovulation occurs, we know that the egg can only survive from 24 hours. So meaning by day 17, the egg is already dead. And it takes time for a new one to start beginning. So for you, 17 to 28 and 1 to 10. So this is not safe because here we have menstruation, there is bleeding. So this is everything you need to understand on the menstruation cycle. So if you want a full lesson on reproduction and other topics, feel free to WhatsApp this line. Yeah, and to join our first revision academy, and don't forget to subscribe to my Facebook